Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 591 on Tuesday, the 13th of August, 2024. Hello, I'm Alan.
Hello, I'm Andrew. And this week we'll be talking about money, eye-watering amounts of money. And in new car news, we are curious about one addition to a car. In points of interest, we point those still looking for a holiday in the UK to some destination ideas. But first, we have the tiniest sliver of follow-up. And it is surprising no one at all who has been paying attention that China is unhappy with the EU's tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. In fact, they feel so strongly about it that they think that what the EU has done has broken WTO rules. And on top of that, they say that they lack factual and legal basis, as I quote from the Reuters article linked in the show notes. The Chinese government has said that they have not actually taken the EU to the WTO legally, but they have reserved the right to file a lawsuit. This was a much closer to the bow shot across than they have done previously with the increasing of costs and tariffs for stuff leaving China to say, think we should really chat about this, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
But as ever, we will keep our eyes on this one, and when there is another update, we will come and bore you with it.
Yay, I can't wait. In the meantime, new news. New news is that Jaguar is spending money. It is going to spend up to £3 billion to invest in flexible internal combustion engine platforms because they're expecting those platforms to have to stay on sale for longer than they were originally expecting.
Them and the rest of the car industry.
Them and the rest of the motor industry, yes. It's increased its 5-year investment plan from £15 billion to £18 billion, according to the Autocar article that will be linked in the show notes. It's building on a plan from last April. One thing, there's a lot of harping about decreased demand. It's actually a decrease in the increasing demand for EVs in the UK right at the minute. So lots of people are sort of harping on about that. But it's worth reminding you that most of the rest of the world outside of the continent of Europe and even to the far east of the of the European continent, EVs are not such a big deal. There are plenty of markets around the world where you still need an internal combustion engine, just simply because there's no EV infrastructure or anything like that at all.
Yep. But that's not the only news from the JLR group. We hear from Jaguar that after how many shows on the trot where we're going, hello, Jaguar, hello, is anything happening?
I don't know. It seems something is happening, and that something is a concept car. Whoa.
When?
December.
Oh, they're rushing it out.
Yeah, so that's December when there's going to be a concept. And then in 2025, they might announce a new model, and then you might get one by 2026. As you were commenting, Andrew, if you were a Jaguar dealer who'd been forced to rebrand, but 2 years ago, say, not even that long, at great expense.
And it is great expense, trust me. I do
It really is, because you can only buy all the stuff from Jaguar and it is expensive. Then I would be a little bit knocked, I think, by this.
I would be incredibly knocked by this, because on top of that, JLR have stepped back from their, we're going to be agency, to, oh, actually, we do need you dealers.
Mm-hmm.
There is a link in the show notes to another Autocar article. And as you go further down and you read about what they're going to do design-wise, I would ignore the pictures because that's Autocar.
They are Autocar made up pictures, yeah.
Guesstimates on what they've been told, which...
And I really hope they're inaccurate.
Well, yes, there are.
Let's be fair here. Let's really hope these are wrong.
Well, one of them's just an Audi. However, some of the phrasing being used and the words, I am even more intrigued to see what comes out, but my hope is not high.
Yes. No, neither is mine.
If you're new to the show, we do want Jaguar to do well. We do like the brand. We are, as with the rest of JLR, we are frustrated with how things are going for them and decisions that have been made that they are dealing with the repercussions of.
Yes.
I think that's the nicest way I can say it.
That's a very nice way of saying that we ponder at the decisions being made by senior management.
Yes.
It's doubly frustrating because we know that they have some of the best engineers in the business.
Yep.
Around there. Some of the absolute best. And I just hope that they're getting on with it and doing their stuff that they know how to do.
Yeah.
And they're mostly being left alone.
Yes, I hope so.
Because then what comes out, it will be technically excellent. I just hope that the more fluffy-wuffy people make sure that it points in the right direction and to the right market segment. And there is a market segment.
Yes.
Is my worry with all of this. So.
I'm going to move us on to Lamborghini anyway, because they're doing rather well. We can see how things can go well for car companies. And Lamborghini have set their best half-year results ever, where they have delivered 5,558 vehicles, which has resulted in a 14.1% year-on-year uptick. I'm quoting from Autocar again. Uptick generated pre-tax profits to £387 million. That has been helped, though, by a price per car increase of, I hope you're all sitting down, 28.2%. Wow. Yeah. It's not like they were, in the price brackets of most of us anyway, and then you've slapped nearly 30% on top. Whoa.
All of that's not just coming from the Urus, which of course has its new hybridized, super powerful version. There's also the new Revuelto plug-in hybrid supercar, and of course the Huracan continues to sell.
Yep, they've sold out until production ends. In fact,
yeah,
my hat goes off to them to have done as well as they have done, and the fact that their order books are absolutely bulging, and it's not because they can't build a car.
I've seen a couple recently, which I think is brave on the roads around here. I first should make a point of saying this. They've been being driven very, very nicely, courteously and well.
Good.
Not like a tit, which quite often happens.
So not central London.
That's really what I'm trying to emphasize here. The other thing is the replacement for the Huracan is expected to be announced at Monterey Car Week, which of course is this week. It's scheduled to come out on the 16th of August. Friday, is that?
I think it's Friday, yeah.
Lots of news from there and probably some new car news for next week.
Yeah. Sticking with the Volkswagen Group, do you want to take us to the Volkswagen Group?
Lamborghini making lots more money and increasing their margins. Volkswagen, on the other hand, are saying that they are really, the rest of Volkswagen Group are really pushing for margins and are cost-cutting and cost-cutting and cost-cutting and cost-cutting. That doesn't sound good to me. I'm sorry.
Because that's on top of the announcement last year with the roof is on fire, etc., etc.
This story that's linked in the show notes from Reuters, they're saying, and I'm going to quote it, Volkswagen need to make significant cost-cutting efforts, and that's a quote within a quote, in the second half of the year and beyond if it's to revive profit margins, the automaker said last week, after reporting first half margins were described as too low. They've already cut capacity by 25% in certain places, including Wolfsburg, and they're going to try to cut 10% capacity across Europe. And CEO Oliver Bloom is quoted here about saying it's all about costs, costs, and costs. I wouldn't be expecting any new touchy-feely things from Volkswagen. I wouldn't be expecting things like the dashboard to stay maybe as nice as they have been over the past few years.
Well, they're just about to put Audi into F1 at eye-watering amounts of money for... I'm still struggling to understand what the trickle-down is for a mainstream car company. Renault's doing its best to get out. Honda's had trouble.
And the alliance there has had that for years. I mean, they tried to put Infiniti on Formula One cars. Nobody knew what Infiniti was. And they go, oh, I know that. I've seen it on the side of a Formula One car when I had an Infiniti and was bored socks off trying to explain what it was.
Yeah. I know F1's not my motorsport, and I get that. Perhaps there's a fair amount of ignorance that I'm prepared to admit there.
Mine neither, but I know all sorts of things from Formula One team names and sponsorships like Haas make machine tools. I didn't know that.
It does seem odd that they're saying we're cutting here, but we're not.
We're going to spend on this ridiculous marketing effort over here.
Yeah, because one of the obvious knock-on cuts is, and they've admitted this, Bloom has said that investment will fall in CARIAD, and we always feared about CARIAD as soon as Rivian's announcement came along. Well, yeah, I say feared. It was obvious that's what's going to happen.
Blatant. Yeah.
Because CARIAD apparently, again, according to this article, are going to carry on with the efforts of the infotainment and connectivity but next generation software platform will be built out of the joint venture with Rivian.
CARIAD have to limp along, finishing what they've started, and then they're going to be dissolved. It's that simple. That's what I would be doing.
And that's 5,000 people out of a job.
I don't know. It's not all 5,000 of them, but yeah, it's not
amount.
Great. It's not good. And
no, it's not. Because you've got management who don't understand.
Yeah.
And who made promises and ideas and all the rest of it.
And they're not going to be people based in Europe, so it's going to be much easier to get rid of them. Whereas Volkswagen's challenge, and I don't know that I like it as a challenge, in fact I don't, is that, of course, heavily unionized workforce in Germany, and therefore they cannot just shift people in, shift people out. That's the way it is in Germany, and it's actually a good thing until you're trying to fix management screw-ups like this.
Yeah, but it means that management have to get clever, isn't it? It stops management just coming around with a big hammer and going, "Oh, we've messed up.
That's all they know.
All of you."
Because they've almost all only ever been within Volkswagen. It's the usual... I don't run around asking for lots and lots of diversity where it's not needed. But I do feel that the Volkswagen board and Volkswagen senior management could really be doing with a shake-up.
Yeah.
And just some people from even outside the car industry, just someone with some fresh ideas who might have experience of something that's not Volkswagen or Ford for a short period before being recalled to the mothership.
Yes.
Actually, the more I think about that, the more that sickens me, that stuff. But that's a different story entirely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to stick in the EU, but I'm going to be talking about EU battery regulations. And there has begun...
This is a cracker, this one, by the way.
This is actually quite a funny story when you dig into it. But the EU Commission wants to amend the battery regulations for 2027 so that the CO2 footprint of how a battery is built is not calculated based on the actual electricity used, but is based on the, brace yourselves everyone, the national electricity mix. Guess which country's automotive industry is not happy with this?
Let's take a hypothetical. It is a hypothetical. You are at the bottom of a set of mountains. You've built your own dam system. You're using your own hydroelectric and this isn't the case anywhere as far as I'm aware, using your own hydroelectric, completely CO2 emission free whilst being generated electricity to create your batteries and everything. And the rest of your country runs on coal. All of a sudden, you're being hit pretty hard there. Now, of course, the reality of this is that Germany is incredibly carbon intensive and carbon centric in its electricity mix. After Fukushima, the politicians in Germany used that as an excuse to almost immediately shut down every single nuclear power plant in Germany, despite the well-known coastal regions of Germany obviously clearly being exposed to tidal waves and tsunamis or something. But they used that as an excuse to close down all the nuclear power stations, so Germany basically runs on coal. Now, France, on the other hand, France has the opposite approach. France is, 80%, maybe slightly more, mix of its generated electricity is nuclear. Practically zero CO2 in France.
Before you go any further, Alan, was there a big, huge argument last year in the EU about how to classify nuclear energy and suggest that perhaps that is actually green energy?
Yes, there was. And you never guess which country was leading that, spearheading that.
I can't imagine.
It might possibly have been France. So really what we see here is a sort of France versus Germany. This is why the EU exists, because everybody can fight things out in Brussels rather than actually having to take to annexing the Sudetenland. That's the great thing about the EU, and that's what people seem to ignore and have missed recently, the last few years.
Do you want to know a country that skyrocketed its solar panel production in the last year?
Go on then, because I don't know this.
China.
Really?
Who makes an awful lot of batteries for EVs?
Wait a minute.
Nearly all the EV batteries in the world.
Oh, that will be in China, where they're cleaning up their energy mix quite significantly.
Yes, they are.
They are. Bit of a challenge here. Germany not so happy. What's amusing, of course, is that there is a well-known American EV brand with a big factory in Germany, but I don't know if batteries are made there. Actually, now I think about it.
I think it's just production, isn't it? It's just
randomly screw stuff together there.
Yeah. It will be interesting on how this one falls out, because on the one hand, it does feel harsh to blame an automotive sector for how a country has decided to power itself, even if they've taken steps to adjust that.
But they are
themselves.
Significant lobbying groups within these countries.
Yep.
And especially in Germany, that can't be underestimated.
No.
And it's not just that, it's the rest of sort of heavy and medium industry as well.
Yes. But that did tickle us immensely when we read it.
It was just so obvious when you read it, and it's like,
Anyway, I've just mentioned China. Do you want to take us there now?
Yes. It takes an awful lot of effort if you are an internationally focused EV company to fail and go bankrupt in China. If you're a Chinese company looking to sell abroad.
Yes.
The amount of help and assistance that the government is prepared and able to give you is not insignificant. I think that's a fair thing to say. There's some I might get telling off for that. But it's quite hard to fail spectacularly. So a small round of applause here to HIPHI. That's HIPHI, the electric vehicle brand, which has filed for bankruptcy in China. It's been trying to restart production of the X, Z, and Y models. I can't imagine why it might have issues with any of those model names outside of China. It's been trying to reorganize, it's been trying to do all sorts of things, but it's not overall been successful. One of the reasons that HIPHI came to people's attention was its ability to read emotions and react and this kind of stuff.
The claims that it could.
What did I say?
You said as it could.
Oh, okay. Yes, pardon me. I meant the word claims that it could. I was so busy concentrating on how I was going to cage my words that I missed out the important ones. But yes, it's no longer essentially.
It's not a thing, but as you say, that is incredibly impressive if you are a Chinese EV company and you go bankrupt in China. Anyway, I'm going to bring us back to Blighty, and this is the news that more than 1,200 Ford UK workers have voted to take industrial action over the proposed pay restructuring that Ford wishes to do. The workers, along with 100 managerial colleagues, as is stated in this Autocar article linked in the show notes, have said that they do not want to accept Ford moving to a purely performance-related pay structure from 2025. They also wish to reduce sick pay entitlement. This is all according to the union Unite.
Be interested to know if that performance-related pay would go across the whole of Ford management as well.
I wonder whether it stops at a certain level of management.
I would imagine it probably does. These things always do. This is interesting on a couple of levels. Don't forget that last year there was a series of very large strikes here in the US, organized by the United Auto Workers Union, at which point Ford caved and paid up.
Eventually.
It was one of the first, eventually, that was happening both at Stellantis and GM and Ford. So it wasn't just a Ford thing. I'm kind of curious, and this has possibly spurred on Unite, to be perfectly honest, when Ford maybe tries to, I don't know if they are trying to introduce the same kind of thing here as in the UK, but I'm sure that has spurred on Unite somewhat. And the challenge with reporting on this kind of thing is that the unions do tend to use quite robust language and be somewhat over the top in what they're actually asking for and what, to be honest, what the management of the company are often doing. It does tend to get blown up quite a lot, so you do have to large pinch of salt, a teaspoonful even of salt at least, needs to be taken along with this. Okay,
do you want to take us to Las Vegas?
I've been a few times, not desperately.
Wi-Fi's a bit rubbish.
Right at the minute, the Wi-Fi, well, it's not. Well, last week, the Wi-Fi was thoroughly dangerous and I just wouldn't use it.
No, not a chance. I wouldn't visit.
Exactly. Black Hat USA took place in Las Vegas last week, and it is, Black Hat is, of course, the conference for ethical hackers?
Security researchers.
Security researchers. Thank you, Andrew. I did rely on you for the correct terminology on this one. One of the things that has come out of this, of course, there are hackathons there, which is not new and interesting ways of using sticky tape, which is a popular way of using the word hack these days, but instead people actually poking at electronic devices and trying to work out if they can poke them hard enough that they'll do things they're not meant to do. Obviously, vehicles with the increased amount of tech in them are a common subject for this. I saw someone tweeting about, yes, the Tesla Cybertruck is still susceptible to at least one type of hack, one type of remote hack, but then it's a Cybertruck, so it's susceptible to just about anything other than looking good.
Well, it needs to be said that there is something called the Car Hacking Village, which turns up at this conference, which is a whole big segment that is dedicated purely to cars, their connectivity, their technology stuff, the software.
All the stuff that makes Andrew angry.
Well, when I see the decisions that are being made, yes.
And in one of these things, one of the things that got a fair old poke last week was Android Automotive, the operating system used by many automakers, including GM, Chery, Cadillac, Buick, Ford, Honda, and many others. Mostly the ones going, oh no, you can't use CarPlay. But that's a side grumble. Android Automotive has been hacked at, and supposedly it was possible for them to infect the head unit and entertainment system, and of course obtain data that's been transferred between the unit and a phone. None of that should be particularly surprising, I guess. But that includes things like text messages, contacts, photos, and private user information, which is why you're exchanging private user information with your car. I just don't know. Far more worrying, of course, is where the infotainment system is wired into much of the rest of the vehicle and the things that can have a knock-on effect onto. Being able to get from infotainment into throttle braking, all of these kinds of things. Now, as I was saying to Andrew before the show, I'd be more worried about people hacking if I bought one of those Android devices, screen device things off of eBay, and we're using that in my car. But then, of course, that's probably not hardwired into the CAN bus of the vehicle and the rest of the vehicle's network.
Yeah.
You sure have my photos, but yeah, at least you can't apply the handbrake in my car.
Well, that is the critical flaw with Android Automotive and Apple CarPlay 2.0, is that they are actually delving deep into the car's workings and goings-on to help project information to us, but that just gives another, as the security researchers will say, another attack surface for people who wish to potentially do naughty things.
Yes. Oh yeah, I recently brought one of those scan tools for my car. And it's the first time I've had one which goes both directions, so you can actually activate things in the car from what is a small Android device via OBD2. But it's for testing things like, can you still move the window up and down, for example, without touching the switch? And if it's not working from the switch, then chances are it's probably the switch. So it's for diagnosis purposes, these kind of things. But it did worry me quite a lot at the kind of things you can test from this $100 unit. And this is one that just goes into the OBD2 port for proper diagnostic reasons. But you think, those same commands.
Yes, quite.
You could use those in a not very good way. Bypass stuff that means that you end up testing your ABS at 60 miles an hour, which is not going to be a lot of fun for anyone.
No.
I know that this is us with that. Even I've got a tinfoil hat on this one, but there's kind of good reason for it, really.
It's justifiable.
Just do be
reasons.
aware.
Yeah.
Do be aware about what runs in your car and what might be possible. And the chances of people going and specifically spearfishing you are quite slim.
Well, I know people that refuse to buy a new car that has Android Automotive in it.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Anyway, that's the end of the first part, Alan. We've made it through.
Awfully grumpy, I'm sorry. The second half is much later, I promise. Think.
It should be okay.
Yeah. So anyway, to divide the two parts, let's have Guilt Minute, a quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on and the hosting running. If you do feel that Motoring Podcast with a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. Let's not talk about Patreon right now. The different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We also have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, we completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all of that, and some of you do so, thank you very much, then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues. The patron bit in the middle there's some changes for new patrons coming up at the minute. If you use the Apple app from the App Store, we recommend you don't use the app from the App Store.
No, use the website.
Use the website.
Don't subscribe via Apple.
Don't subscribe as a patron from Apple.
Yeah.
It's all to do with costing and prices, and Apple have all the money and they want a bit more money.
Well, they're about to lose 20 billion because they're not going to be allowed to use Google as a default search.
Oh, well, there we go.
So they've got to make it up elsewhere, which is to charge anybody that uses their platform 30%. Anyway, moving away from that and back to cars. And I'm going to start new car news with the new Volkswagen Golf R. And we talked about the new Golfs that were revealed not long ago. So it's no surprise that the hot version, or the hottest version, which is the R, is coming out. It's going to have 329 brake horsepower. It's going to cost from £43,320. It also comes in line with the rest of the VW range, whereas in the interior is upgraded. It is much better. There are physical buttons.
Well, it is at the minute anyway.
Yes, until the cost cuttings come back in again. There are physical buttons. The climate control is backlit, so you can see it at night time.
How is that a thing we have to say?
I know, I don't. But don't forget, it wasn't long ago that Volkswagen were boasting, we have a spreadsheet to log where people touch the interior of their cars.
I know.
And we were baffled with that. But improvements are being made, which is the good thing. They have listened to feedback and they have changed certain tactics. Therefore, things like on the steering wheel, it's physical buttons. It's no longer the touch-sensitive, swipey stuff that can accidentally be activated.
Mm-hmm.
There are areas on the touchscreen itself or below the touchscreen it's not haptic now, it's physical interaction. This is all good. The interior is much better. It's surprisingly going to cost £990 less than the outgoing version.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It's going to have a 0 to 62 time of 4.6 seconds, which is quicker. And it will also still come as the Golf R Estate, which, if photocopiers were still a thing, would be for all the photocopiers, paper salespeople out there.
Physical media duplication solutions, I think you mean.
Ah, yes, that's the one. Excellent. These are uniformly praised as good cars, the Golf R.
They're not as popular on the company, seen as they were, because the benefit in kind is quite eye-watering these days. That's why everybody drives Tesla Model 3. These are really good cars, coming soon on a competitive PCP rate to a retail park near you. Nice cars, though.
Okay, Alan, do you want to take us to your favourite segment, which is the Resto Mod?
So you'll have noticed that I normally end up starting new car news, but he's jiggled it around this week just so that I could end up with the Resto Mod story.
But it might be one that doesn't get him as angry.
This one here, there's a new Resto Mod being launched from a well-known British brand called Arcade Cars. No, I hadn't heard of them either. And they've come up with a model called the Sojourn. What you'll find the Sojourn looks like is an ex-Swiss military Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon that has, I'm going to say, had a significant makeover, but I'm sure has been pretty much disassembled and reassembled again to become a Resto Mod nice car for driving on the beach or whatever, from a mere £101,000 or $130,000. All going to be left-hand drive because, of course, they've come from Switzerland. But you can choose what you want. You can have whatever setup you need, want, or desire as far as colors, interiors, and all these things. Generally, the standard is the traditional long bench 8-seat layout, where it's essentially the long wheelbase, but with benches down both sides in the rear. That's kind of curious about that one, how you do seatbelts to make that work in the UK. But
I presume that's lap.
Yeah, but alternatively, you can have 6 individual seats should you need, want, or desire. In fact, it's one of those vehicles where you can have whatever the heck you want.
Just make sure your pocket is deep enough.
Yeah, standard top, roll-up canvas soft top, which is absolutely great in places that aren't necessarily the UK.
No, it's perfect. Perfect for the school run, no matter what the weather. Time for big coat, kids.
What I love best about this is that you retain the original 2.3-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine with a whopping 128 horsepower and 140 pound-foot of torque, so that you can go as slow as you want in the traditional G-Wagon manner. You can also upgrade to a 2.8-litre petrol engine with 151 horsepower, or you could go for an electric version. But in this case, I'd say no, because the electric version is probably going to be far too fast. I was behind something very similar when I was on holiday. I popped up to see, on my route, I went to visit Doug from Doug's Cars. And as I was crossing Amelia Island, which, by the way, is the least Florida-like part of Florida, it's really nice. It's the opposite of Orlando, okay? It is really pretty, really lovely little place. I was behind one that he's photographed. I think it's been on the internet a couple of times because it's a local. And it is a lot like this, a G-Wagon a lot like this, but it is Swiss road mending orange, municipal orange, with a black top. And it looked fantastic. It looked great. And I was reminded just how good these look. Mm. And yeah, it's a resto mod that I would rather it was more original.
£101,000 is quite cheap. If that was a Defender or a long wheelbase,
it would be much more. It would
be at least $250,000, wouldn't it, for what they're doing?
I would have this with the least fancy cabin that you could get. I would want sort of waterproof cloth seats, and I would want just leave it as plastic. Don't make it all leather covered and stuff. And I think that it would again become with the 2.3 litre engine, which is the same ones I had in my W124. It's going to essentially be a cockroach car.
Yeah.
And continue forever. And I can very much get on board with that. I know that's weird. That's completely the opposite to my take on 964s, but 964s would survive on their own.
No, but it's a subtle resto mod, isn't it? They've basically made it so it works today by reading between the lines.
Well, it's perfect for driving to the beach.
Which I'm on board with.
Yeah. If I wanted to tow a small boat, the tender for my yacht, down to the beach or whatever else and do other lifestyle-y stuff, then that's absolutely perfect. And I love it. I think it looks great.
Okay, I'm going to move this not to a resto mod, but to a new thing that Fiat are going to do with the Grandi Pandi. Can't call it anything else now. They are now going to integrate the charging cable in the front of the vehicle that is used on 7 kilowatt chargers is going to be fitted to the car, so you don't have to go around and wrestle with a separate cable, potentially cover it in muck and filth, which I have done in the past. And it looks, in the picture, it looks like it retracts nicely in as you would expect, say, a vacuum cleaner's power cord.
Because one of the issues you get is whenever I remember the days when I had press cars.
So you went abroad.
Yeah. Whenever you have press cars, you end up with this. There's always this bag in the boot with the cable in it for low power charging. So, of course, whenever you're rapid charging or more, then the cable is attached to the unit because it's so flipping big and heavy. The rest of the time, if you're using slow chargers, then you can take the cable is in a bag in the back. You have to plug it in. You leave it overnight. You come back. It's wet. It's whatever else. You've got to try and wrestle it into a shape that will fit back in the bag, or just throw it in the boot, dirty and a mess, until you can be bothered sorting it out and wrestling with it. And Fiat said, well, why can't we make this a bit more like vacuum cleaners where it retracts into it and just you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't go in the boot, doesn't go into the car. You don't have to wrestle with it and get your clean clothes dirty. Let's just make it retract into the front. And I think that's genius.
I'd like to try it. Absolutely.
I think it's a darn good idea.
Because when I first heard about it, and until I discussed it with Alan, I was like, is that a problem that needs solving? And bearing in mind, I am somebody who has moaned about getting filthy with a cable, and moaned.
The hypocrisy of him saying, "What's the point of this?" was quite spectacular.
Oh, I've been much more hypocritical in the past.
No, this is true.
But I would like to try it because then I think I would fully understand it better.
I just like the thought that lots of sort of real human use and stuff has been put into it.
That makes me much happier than the first part of the show.
Yes. Yeah, totally. A sad thing, though, Peugeot. The 508 will go off sale in December, both saloon and estate versions, which is a shame because good-looking car.
It's okay. An indication of how good-looking it is. Mrs. Crack Windscreen, every time she sees one on the roads, which isn't that often, goes, "Oh, that's nice looking," whether it's saloon or estate.
Exactly. Along with that, the PSE sub-brand, which made the fantastically powerful, but everybody went, I couldn't buy one new because it's just going to depreciate like a stone.
So guess what? Nobody bought them new.
Guess what? Nobody bought them new. And as a result, the Peugeot Sport engineered sub-brand is effectively dead in the UK. It is effectively dead pretty much everywhere.
It's just dead, except for the hypercars.
Except for hypercars and any time they want to use it for racing but actual road drivable ones probably not around anymore, which is a shame.
No. And therein is a lesson of, if you say something is good and you can afford to buy it, go buy it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we lose these things.
People,
We lose
no, I'm going to wait until it's on the
the
used
company
market.
has to make money. And the only way they can make money is by selling a new car. It's really jolly simple. And I understand many people can't afford them, by the way.
So should we talk about a car company that's not making any money then?
Yes, let's move on to Maserati. And they announced that their V8s will go, and that means the Quattroporte and the Levante are axed. They are pretty old, to be fair.
They're coming to end of life anyway.
Yeah. Again, if you like a thing, go buy the thing if you can. They're going to stick with V6s and also hybrid, obviously, as everyone moves to a more electrified future.
Curious to see what happens with Maserati, though.
Yeah.
Because Tavares was on about, we cannot afford to have brands that do not make money. And then Stellantis themselves pushed back and said, no, we're committed to all 14 brands.
Well, they've been given 10 years and we're 3 years into it.
Well, yeah.
I think that's unfair to attack someone. But what we think is fair and
exactly, and
maybe different.
On the other hand, I think they're more likely to sell Maserati than anything else, possibly to Ferrari. But I also think that they have more serious issues with their North American brands, other than Jeep.
Yes, Stellantis do. But the Maserati tail reminds me of Jaguar, or Jaguar reminds me of Maserati, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That people haven't worked out what they're exactly for yet.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas Jaguar have just stopped, which is a brave move, and on the one hand, with bearing that thought in mind, a good move, Maserati are possibly limping along and getting one or two things right, but still not getting other things right. And rather than being able to have like a clean sweep.
It is, as you, to paraphrase what you said earlier on, it is a bit of a Seat. We've got this brand, we kind of know what it is, but we don't really know what it is enough yet.
Yeah.
We're not really sure what it's for, but it's a good brand, so we don't want to kill it. But, tricky one.
Well, that brings us to points of interest, and I need to make it clear for all those who
he
play
did this on purpose, by the way.
I'm explaining, so don't worry, you're not going to be attacked for this. So for those who play along to the now occasional drinking game, Alan, if he has to or discusses Toyota, Lexus, Mazda in the good old days, then we would all raise a drink to our lips and take a good glug. However, in this instance, I sorted the order out and it fell that Alan is now going to talk about a vehicle from one of those brands. It is not his fault, and he is exempt this week from the drinking game.
Why? Why are we friends? I would rather drop you and end up friend and have this mega cruiser instead. So this week's Lunchtime Read is all about a vehicle that many people don't know exists. It is the thinking man's reliable Hummer. It's the Toyota Mega Cruiser. It was a very limited production off-road Japanese equivalent of the Humvee, which was intended really for Japanese defense forces overseas rather than actually within the country because it's too big. It's a Humvee style vehicle, but a Toyota. Inside, you get the little sort of glowing green 8-segment clock. You get the same steering wheel as you get in a Carina. You get, there's a lot of familiar parts in there, folks. But it's that sort of Humvee style layout with the engine well back, 4-wheel steering as well, so that it is actually maneuverable, unlike a Humvee. They are very, very rare, and they are super cool as a result.
Yes, you need to open the Hagerty link in the show notes. Look at the pictures because I just drooled over them.
I've been looking at these for a long years when they were practically nothing.
And then also to learn about this particular vehicle, but also the history of it. It's just marvelous, just a marvelously mad thing.
I do love that the only comment against this Hagerty story so far is one point by someone called Eric pointing out this one has the 15B FT rather than the 15B FTE engine. Anyway.
So Alan, when you go and make comments online, do you call yourself Eric?
No, I don't. I just go, oh, well, never mind. Everybody's enjoying themselves, so I'm not going to interrupt.
Okay, let's move on to the list of the week, and we thank Autocar and their slideshow that works once again.
I think we could almost stop saying that now. It does work, everyone from Autocar. It's good.
But I feel we've spent so many years saying it wasn't that some effort to say thank you now.
I know. It is appreciated.
I mean, I know they understand we are saying thank you. It's okay. But this one is called The Weird and Wonderful Delights of the Isle of Man Motor Museum. Alan, there are 41 slides. Going through them all, I mean, there's the usual suspects, and then there's some rather unusual, actually, that crop up. So has anything caught your eye?
One of the things that caught my eye, it's actually a bunch of them. It's a whole series of prototypes of the Monica, which was a very... it was a not very successful French attempt at building a super saloon. It's one of those cars which appears in Top Trump's cards and nowhere else. And here they have prototype number 1, prototype number 2, and a later sort of not completed prototype as well. I forget who ended up with one of the prototypes that was photographed with it. Someone quite famous ended up with it, I think.
Prototype 2 is quite challenging.
Prototype 2 is aesthetically challenged, yes. It's thankfully not what the real car ended up like. It was more like 1. But the Monica itself was a very attractive, interesting vehicle, which went nowhere. But to have the prototypes is very cool.
Yeah. Well, I've gone a bit more probably cliched, I think would be the word for it. And the Fiat 130. Which is slide 36 for those playing along at home.
For me, that was one of my sort of top 3. I figured that if you'd chosen the same as me, then that was one of the ones I was going to go for.
It's just glorious, absolutely,
and not black, so it doesn't look like it was in So it doesn't look like the ones that were in the Italian job.
Yes,
that's what I always think of with those.
Just is that a bluey silver?
It looks like it. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell on the lighting, but they are lovely, lovely cars.
Yeah, so clean.
Some of Pininfarina's best work.
Yeah.
Last but not least, this week, and finally, is from Jeep. And this new map from Jeep shows, according to John Redfern on Motoring Research, shows the UK's best driving destinations for summer family fun. He said in a summer family fun type of voice. There's a partnership between Jeep, Ordnance Survey, map of 100 locations for less obvious family days out. I noticed that one of them is Schiehallion. So Schiehallion is a mountain just on the shores of Loch Rannoch in Perthshire. And what a terribly, I've not actually climbed Schiehallion myself, but what a terribly sadistic family day out. Because if there's one thing Schiehallion is famous for, as well as being key in the initial calculations of the weight and mass of the Earth, then it is the fact that Schiehallion has many, many, many false peaks. Because towards the top it becomes like a staircase on the side that people normally climb, and so you go, oh, there's a peak. Oh no, there it is. Oh no, there it is. So that's a bit of a sadistic choice of mountain to climb as a family. Wonderful views from the top.
Yeah, there's a link to an interactive map from Jeep and Ordnance Survey in the article from Motoring Research, which in turn is linked in our show notes as ever. But if you haven't been anywhere this summer, or if you're looking for something outside of summer, there's some really interesting destinations, actually. I had a look through all the lists. I know some of them.
Yes, yeah.
Been to quite a few of them.
And varied and all across the country, so there should be some not very far from you.
Yep.
That's about it for this week, I think. So don't forget, folks, that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback, share your thoughts for the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. Andrew, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is if you search for Crack Windscreen on Mastodon. I have a presence on Twitter, but I'm not looking at it at the moment because it's so messy. But also you could try and connect with me on LinkedIn, where I use my actual name. And Alan, if people would like more mountain climbing advice, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you personally?
Beyond don't climb in the Blue Hills in Massachusetts, because it's all stony staircases and generally miserable, and I completely forgot that on Sunday morning, then you can get in touch with me on pretty much any of the social networks used by the over 35s. So not TikTok. Where I'm at AJP Bradley, that's BRADLEY. Again, trying to wind down my Twitter use a bit at the minute, so Blue Sky or Threads. Generally prefer Blue Sky. We'll be back pretty soon, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Andrew Clues.
And safe motoring.